What's a potential double murderer doing with vast assets and the ability to escape, unless he's being watched very carefully, wandering around apparently without tight police surveillance even, because he's able to get away?
If his blood is not proven through DNA testing to be the blood on the glove or at the scene, the case is over.
Mark Furman is clearly guilty. He went in there and put that glove there with 14 police officers there when he went on that plane in Chicago and cut O.J.'s hand and got blood there. You're right.
Welcome, everybody, to our show today. We're coming to you once again live today from Los Angeles, from KCAL here. What you were just seeing there are some highlights of our show yesterday. That was when we kicked off our week-long look at the O.J. Simpson case. We're going to be live here in Los Angeles from KCAL all week, taking a closer, deeper look at what everybody is still talking about, really all over the world. This is the most talked about murder case in American history. And the question we're raising in our show and our coverage all week is, do you think O.J. Simpson can really get a fair trial? About a fallen American hero in this American tragedy. We're talking about two people now dead, families in mourning, two children left without their mother. And still, America, maybe even the world, continues to ask, can O.J. get a fair trial? Today, our phone lines are once again open to take calls from all across the nation while we continue our discussion. We'll flash that number for you on the screen. But first, I want to update the latest news as it stands right now today. There was a Time magazine, CNN poll that came out. It says that 63% of whites feel that O.J. Simpson can get a fair trial, while 61% of blacks say he cannot. And that is making many of us, I know we were talking about this before the show started, it's making many of us today wonder, has race now taken center stage as we continue dissecting this courtroom drama? Well, Dr. Earl Hutchinson says that race is definitely an issue and that our society is hostile towards black men, especially when they're involved with white women. He is the author of The Assassination of the Black Male Image and publisher of Ofari's Bi-Monthly, a news and public affairs journal. Larry Elder, who is joining us, is a radio talk show host at KABC here in Los Angeles. He says that many African Americans find racism in places where it really does not exist. The O.J. case, he says, being a good example of that. And Stan Goldman is rejoining us from yesterday's show. He's a professor of law at Loyola University. And Stan says he believes that O.J. Simpson can get a fair trial and that race has nothing to do with it. Gentlemen, welcome to the show today. That Time magazine CNN poll saying 63% of whites feel O.J. can get a fair trial, while 61% of blacks say he cannot. What does that mean to you as you think about this, Larry Elder? What does that...
Well, what it means to me, Rolonda, is that we have real problems in this country. A 9-year-old black boy from New Orleans just wrote President Clinton a letter and said, people are dying in my neighborhood. I'm afraid I may get killed. A few days later, a drive-by shooter shot him in the head and he died. Those are real problems. I don't worry about a $10 million asset man, a famous man who can hire the best defense team ever assembled. I don't worry about somebody like that being able to get a fair trial. We have serious problems in this country, and I think this whole racism thing with respect to O.J. Simpson is blown way out of proportion and takes time, effort, and energy away from real problems that we ought to be concerned about in this country.
Why do you think it's playing such a pivotal role?
Rolonda, look, we have black leaders in this country, like Lonnie Guinier, who says to black people, I don't care how talented you are, how competent you are, whites are permanently angry and hostile towards you and they will not vote for you. Therefore, we should get rid of one person, one vote. We have a Jesse Jackson who says Fox Broadcasting ought to be sued on the grounds of racism because they canceled 2 black sitcoms and nobody watched anyway. Out here in Los Angeles, we have a congresswoman named Maxine Waters who refers to the thug-driven 1992 LA riots as a civil uprising. So black leaders have put rank-and-file black people in a state of constant agitation and hypersensitivity, and that's why blacks perceive there to be racism where often there is not.
Earl says there's racism just inbred in this nation, particularly against black men, and especially if they're dealing with white women, as in the case of O.J. You say what about the whole race? Is race taking center stage
Well, let's
here?
go back to the I wouldn't say it's taking center stage in this particular case, but I think we'd be very naive to think that racial aspects could not play a part in this. But I want to say this. You mentioned the CNN poll, and certainly that's not the only poll. There have been a lot of polls that have been taken recently.
This is the one that is most recent.
The most recent one, guilt or innocence, and certainly you have this wide disparity in terms of how African Americans see it and how whites see it. But that shouldn't surprise anyone, because unfortunately what has happened over the last few years, we do have a great chasm, a great division in terms of how African Americans perceive race and how certainly whites perceive race. And I'm saying that now in the O.J. Simpson case, we have a situation where you have an African American man, albeit he's wealthy, powerful, certainly the status and all of that. But bottom line is, certainly given the history of racial and sexual stereotyping, especially with African American men, and especially in recent times, as it's been driven through much of the mainstream media, through Hollywood, through films and the rest, I think, again, it would be a little disingenuous not to think that some African Americans, in this case, more than some, would see race involved in this. And by the way, I think it's important to say that we're not saying, and most African Americans I hear are not saying that O.J. Simpson was arrested because he was a black man. Obviously, a heinous crime was committed. Or that he is on trial or will be tried simply because he's a black man. If anyone's saying that, that's not correct, and it shouldn't be correct. Just simply the fact, given some of the history of stereotyping, we must be on guard that race does not creep into it.
Okay, Stan, but race is creeping into it. Let me bring you in as our law expert here, because while the defense is saying that race is not going to play an issue in this whole thing, they bring in the whole issue about the racism, the alleged reports about this officer, Furman, being racially, you know, that he's a racist. Why, if they're saying one hand they're not going to bring in the race issue, why are they bringing it up in court?
I'm not entirely certain when they said that wasn't going to be an issue, they were totally serious about it. I think it is going to be an issue. It's hard for me to disagree with either of the two other guests. I have no doubt race has to play a part in any case. You know, even the U.S. Supreme Court, as conservative as the U.S. Supreme Court presently is constituted, said a few years ago that in any case in which there are victims and defendant in a violent crime of different races, race may play a part in that case, and they advise, although they did not order, but they advised courts to allow the lawyers, when picking the jury, to be allowed to ask questions about race. What are your feelings about race? We have a defendant who is black, we have a victim who is white. How do you feel about that? Just to find out that if some of those people who might be sitting on the jury do have these racial feelings that could interfere with their judgment, we find out about it and try to get them off the jury. You can't avoid that in a case. The question is, how significant is it in this case more than any other case? But is he being framed just because he's a black superstar?
There are many people who say that he's such a superstar that he's transcended race.
Rolonda, that's exactly what's happened, and that's exactly the point. That's what I find intriguing about this whole dialogue. Here is a guy who has supposedly violated the deepest, darkest taboo we have, which is to marry a white woman. Now we find out there's evidence that he beat her before they got married. He certainly beat her during the marriage. He apparently beat her after the marriage. And he never lost his endorsement from Hertz. He never lost his endorsement from MCI. He had a very long movie career. He's been an analyst for NBC and ABC. Poor Jennifer Capriati, the tennis star, smokes a joint and loses her endorsements. So if there's this massive conspiracy to get Mr. Simpson, why did it take him so long to do it? He gave them ample ammunition to have brought him down well before now, if in fact race were as significant a factor as many people think.
I got to take a commercial, but good point. When we come back, we're going to open up our telephone lines, take your calls from across the nation. We're going to talk to our audience. We're going to talk about the role of the media on today's show and ask the question, do you think the news reports have been biased? We're going to take some telephone calls, as I mentioned, so go to the phone and join the conversation. We'll be right back. From trading cards to T-shirts, should anyone profit from the O.J. Simpson case? Join Rolonda from Los Angeles.
Well, I think America is a racist country, and I think to a certain degree part of it, there's always going to be a grain of truth to those charges.
Personally, I don't think that he should have married that woman in the first place. Now, when he did marry her, O.J. made a statement that black women don't have enough class for him. See, that's the decision that he made then. This is the decision that he has to deal with now.
As we can tell, oh, you didn't like that. Oh, come on. What's this reaction? What's this reaction? Somebody talk to me. What are you thinking? New York reaction. A New York reaction. What do you think? Come on, stand up for me.
His first wife was a sister. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. But hey, come on. Well, you know something. We sit up here and we ask the question, is race playing an issue here? And well, you might say, no, no, no. When you hear something like that, my whole audience starts to react. Hello? We learned something about ourselves. This is day 2 of our week-long coverage of the O.J. Simpson case, and really a lot of coverage of America watching this case. And what are we talking about? What are we saying? We're coming to you live from KCAL in Los Angeles all this week. And we've been talking about the role that race, and we'll eventually be talking about what role media is playing in this whole coverage and the case itself. We're opening our phone lines all across the nation. Come on and join the conversation. Hello, caller.
Hello?
Hi, what's your name?
Barbara from
Barbara,
Massachusetts.
where are you calling from?
Massachusetts.
Hello, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I think OJ's attorneys will use whatever they can, and if they think the race issue will work, then they're going to go for it. But I think the public should not forget the real issue. 2 people were violently murdered. Did OJ the man, not OJ the black man, but OJ the man, do it or not?
You've got, thank you very much, Barbara, but you got somebody here. What are you shaking your head for? Come on, stand up and join me.
Yeah.
You didn't react too well to what you just heard.
Yeah, I'm with Citizens Commission on Human Rights International, and to try to say that race is not going to be an issue in this trial when we're in Los Angeles, a city where race is just not a problem, you see, where we're going to have a jury here. You see, the problem is we're going to have a jury, and there are attitudes in Los Angeles. Right now in Los Angeles, better than 1 out of every 4 black men, age 18 to 39, is in prison, awaiting sentencing or on parole. And people say there's no race problem here. 90% of them are in for drug-related offenses. There's more cocaine being snorted up in Brentwood, Bel Air, and Beverly Hills than there is in South Central.
What does that have to do with racism?
You don't go over the wall up there in Brentwood and search the place unless it's O.J. Simpson's house, you see. But down in South Central, you can throw kids against the wall, turn their pockets inside out, you can crash through.
But is that because he's a superstar, or is that a racial issue? I mean,
No, but what I'm saying is that because juries are going to be involved, race is going to be a major issue here in Los Angeles.
well, let me ask this question. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But let me pose the question to our panel here, because what you're saying is correct. I mean, the whole nation, the whole world who's got news has been watching this. We've been watching the riots. We've been watching the Rodney King situation, and now we've got this jury that has to come from Los Angeles. Can he get a fair trial? Wait, hold on. I got to hear my panel.
Let me answer something. Let me go back to something I said before about race and sexual stereotypes and how it can creep in through the back door. We're not talking about racism per se frontally, white sheets, burning crosses. We're not talking about that. But let's go back to the Time magazine cover, and I think this really reinforced in the minds of many African Americans is there something else in operation here. We now know what happened with Time magazine. There was a doctored photo of O.J. Simpson. Made him look a little bit more sinister, made him look more sinister. And so many people said, would this have been done if this had been, say, a prominent white individual that was on trial facing a heinous charge like this? So I went back, by the way, and looked at Time magazine. They had a picture of Ollie North, by the way, 2 years ago. They had a picture of John Wayne Gacy, who was convicted serial killer and executed in Illinois. They had a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer, mass murders, bodies all over the place. And guess what? They had pictures of each of these individuals. No doctor, no tent, no anything. So the question comes up in many African American minds, why this guy? Why a black man? Yeah, rich, famous, powerful, and all that. But why would they do it with him? And I'll tell you, let me tie it back in with the stereotyping thing. Historically, when you look at the press, when African American men basically are being charged or accused, even if it's true or not, that has been an old tradition in the press to make them look more sinister. And so this fed into the perception of many African Americans that, yes, we have a double standard here. And race is creeping in.
Yes, but question from the audience.
Okay, I can't disagree with anything the panel has said on the Time article. If you ask about any black person being on trial, 61% of the black people would say they're not going to get a fair trial. The white people don't really, not like white people don't care, but they think that the justice system is going to handle it. On the fair trial issue, I do not think OJ will get a fair trial because the media wants a big trial. The more the media hypes it up, the more money they're going to make through commercials. The DA itself is going for, it sounds like, Attorney General seat. If he gets a big trial, big publicity, he's going to have it.
Do you feel that you're being manipulated by all this information?
Always being manipulated. They want you to watch it. They want you to think that it's happening. They want to make OJ a bad guy, because if OJ seems like a bad guy, no matter white or black, you know, they're going to prosecute him.
Okay, all right. Hold on just one second. And I'm coming right back to you, because I know there's some, I promise you, we're going to come to your next segment. But I agree with, I hear what you're saying, and I know as a reporter that, you know, this kind of story, people would give their front two teeth to go and cover. And of course, we know the fierce competition that happens between news organizations. We're going to continue this conversation. Call us, the lines are open, as we continue talking about the OJ case and its effect on American homes.
They let me know what they think, which is basically they're just unhappy with the way we've been covering this.
And they're saying things like what?
That we're sympathizing too much with OJ. We're not doing enough for the victims.
Hey, I wish we ought.
What are you doing? Hiding from the dishes?
Hey, I wish we ought to dish stuff.
What do you call this?
Not enough.
Wrong. This is joy. All you need is a spoonful.
A spoonful? You mean a wheelbarrow for this disaster?
This is one way I'd save money.
Look for Joy's new low price. Now you can save more. Many bargain brands quit, but a spoonful of Joy cleans the sinkful.
Spoonful work. You do know how to save.
I am a shopping animal.
You'll love the price. The Joy spoonful cleans a sinkful.
Ah, New Craft Honey Dijon. You know, when I was a boy in France, I invented Honey Dijon.
New Craft Honey Dijon. A glorious combination of sweet honey and tangy Dijon.
This is true.
YoPlay. Calcium-rich, active yogurt cultures. 99% fat-free. That's why Shonda Sawyer does it every day. Smooth, creamy YoPlay. Do it for you.
Welcome back, everybody. We're live in Los Angeles. We're talking about race and the media and the O.J. Simpson case. Before we left, I know, Larry, you were in there. You were saying something was absurd.
Well, this whole notion that somehow the men and women of the press, of the media, are racist and are out to get black people. I mean, that's just... It's just so offensive to me to think of all these journalists, most of whom, by the way, are liberal. Most journalists are Democrats. Democrats are typically perceived to be more sympathetic to minorities than Republicans or independents. It's just so incredibly unfair. Let me give you another example, Rolonda. Well, wait one second, sir. I'll give you one example. During the 1988 presidential campaign, Jesse Jackson, for one brief shining moment, was the front runner. There have been allegations of extramarital affairs. Nobody knows whether or not they're true, but there have been allegations. No major story about that at all. The press leaned over backwards not to be perceived as being racist. Gary Hart, there were allegations along those lines, and they hounded him. We don't even need to talk about what's going on with President Clinton. There's lots of evidence to show that the press leans over backwards to avoid the perception of being perceived as being racist.
One at a time.
We're talking about justice before the law. If 1 out of every 4 white men in Los Angeles was in prison awaiting sentencing or on parole, we'd be in the midst of the bloodiest revolution this world has ever seen.
You made that point earlier, and it's a silly point.
It is not a silly point because there's direct discriminatory prosecution in the city of Los Angeles. There's discriminatory prosecution here that goes after people of color first for drug offenses and leaves the white community alone when 87% of all the drugs are being consumed in the white community. Now that's in your city. And that's what you're denying. You know, we have had in the city of Los Angeles psychiatrists who have talked to the police department here, like Jolly West from UCLA.
Make your point quick. We got to move.
Profile offenders in a particular way that sends the police after people of color.
Yeah, but you have to make certain that the friends of O.J. Simpson don't do him more harm than good. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but you've got to understand, in my opinion, in a normal case like this, and I'm just talking about the law in California, not the morality of it or the justice of it, this would not be a death penalty case. For various legal reasons, they would not file a death penalty in this case. They have not dropped the death penalty yet. And I've got to believe one of the reasons why the district attorney has not dropped the death penalty is because a group of individuals from the black community went to see the district attorney, and within 3 or 4 days after that, the district attorney could have made a decision at the hearing, at the arraignment, to have dropped the death penalty and chose not to. I think it would have looked too much like he was caving into pressure. That may have been harm done by O.J.'s friends. One has to play this carefully.
Who would that offend here in Los Angeles? Those people who say that there's not a race problem. Sheriff Block used to campaign every week on television here saying that there was 20 to 30,000 murderers in South Central Los Angeles. Daryl Gates
if he dropped the death penalty pursuant to community pressure from one group, other groups complain. Whether they should complain, whether you believe morally they're right in complaining, whether you believe they're really crypto-racist.
From the audience,
they would complain.
Let's start with something that makes logical sense. Let's talk about the media's assassination, pretrial assassination of O.J. Simpson. Number one, if you consider the dissemination of information by the media concerning factual evidence that was not adduced at the preliminary hearing, you would say, why is there such a disproportionate reporting of inaccurate evidence by the media as opposed to what came out in the preliminary hearing? The evidence that came out in the preliminary hearing was absolutely inconclusive to even charge O.J. Simpson with a crime at this particular point in time. Now, let's look at it this way. The media is comprised of predominantly whites. The judiciary, the media has tainted not only the credibility of the media itself, but also the judiciary. If you look at what happened so far as the grand jury hearings, for an example, here you have a trial by ambush. If you have a grand jury and you have the public at large who will eventually sit on a jury trial, if a grand jury indicts O.J. Simpson, what's the predicate? The predicate would be justification for a jury to say we're justified in convicting O.J. Simpson. So you have, there is no ski mask, there is no weapon, there are any number of inaccuracies perpetrated by the media that now we're even coming out and saying there was blood found in his plumbing. There was no blood found in his plumbing.
You got an agreeer here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. I had to deal with with the way the media hyped South Central. It's a bad place to live, but it's a very, very beautiful place to live. But the point is,
I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles too.
But the point is that they're going to have to go outside the L.A. County. I hope it's not going to happen in Simi Valley if they have a trial.
I was born.
Okay, hold on.
Rolonda.
Yes, but I agree with all that the media did misreport a lot of things, but that has nothing to do with racism. It was just the media.
Rolonda, this happens to be the most famous criminal defendant in the history of this country. There's going to be a great deal of media attention. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Black, white, green, whatever.
Earl, you disagree?
Mine's a quick soundbite. What he's saying, what the other guy is saying back there, what O.J. got, was a presumption of guilt, not a presumption of innocence.
Okay, the media is getting a lot of attention itself as we cover O.J. The question we continue to raise is, can O.J. really get a fair trial? We'll talk about that when we come back. Keep the phone lines open, keep calling. We'll get to you when we come back. Folks, as we've been continuing our conversation live from Los Angeles today about the O.J. Simpson case, you know, this scene, 95 million television viewers watched this. I remember myself glued to the television, talking on the phone with a friend, like it was silence. It was like, can you believe we're watching this? I mean, this is the biggest thing, I think, that has brought America together. Whether we agree or disagree with each other, it sure has brought us together on the same plate. I mean, do you know that this whole thing, if this was with the ratings that that one scene received, that if it was a television program, it would be the 7th highest rated TV show. Can you believe that? Unbelievable. So the media coverage of this case has been incredible, and a lot of people are starting to wonder whether, based on the constant media barrage, whether O.J. Simpson can really get a fair trial. If the public didn't thirst for late-breaking developments in the case of O.J. Simpson, we would not be barraged with headline after cover story after special report, all on this sensational saga of fame, fortune, and murder. No way would the major networks preempt some of our favorite soap operas just to cover O.J. in court even before he's been put on trial. Not if we didn't tune in. Reporters are paid to deliver news, and the more exclusive it is, the better. But with so many reporters trying to scoop the rest of the reporters, big stories often turn into feeding frenzies. Mr. Cochran, what can you tell us?
Very important. I'm glad to be here, glad to be on the team.
It seems that for most Americans, the need to know more about the O.J. Simpson case threatens to surpass the amount of news on any given day. Is it any wonder that a Los Angeles television station aired a hard-hitting report, placing prosecutor Marcia Clark at the crime scene before a search warrant had been issued, only to retract the story the next day after further investigation? O.J. Simpson's trial is still weeks away, but for many in the court of public opinion, whether he's guilty or innocent is based on the news generated live on tape or in print from perhaps the biggest media spectacle of all time. Let's bring in some folks now who are in the media themselves, and let's pose some tough questions to you as we talk about media, racism, and the O.J. Simpson case. I'd like you to meet Mike Walker. He's a general editor for the National Enquirer. Mike believes the press coverage will not affect the outcome of this case. Now, y'all chuckled, but I tell you one thing, the National Enquirer sales are going through the roof, aren't they, Mike?
Well, not only that, the other night I was on Nightline, and they ran down a list of all the errors the press have made, which you've been discussing, and I sort of cringed waiting to say I couldn't think of any that we had, and we had not. But as far as the outcome of the case, it amazes me that people think that O.J. will not get a fair trial. I think, and I've heard all the comments about the race question and so forth, certainly in the media, somebody out here said that most people in the media are liberal Democrats, and I think that's probably true. And I would like to say that if you want to accuse us of tearing people down, we are equal opportunity media.
We tear everybody down.
I don't care who you are. If this had been Sly Stallone, I mean, it would have been an even bigger story. I think he can get a fair trial. He's assembled the greatest defense team in history, and of course he is the most famous celebrity defendant in history.
Hold on, Mike. I want to get back to you, and I want you to also answer whether you think racism is playing a part here, but don't answer it yet. I want to bring some other folks in. I want you to also meet Elka Warner. She is a court reporter for the United Press International. She has been one of the few reporters who's actually in the courtroom covering the Simpson story from the very start. Welcome, Elka. Before I get to you, let me also bring in Dick Price. He is a staff writer for USA Today, the paper that this morning, today, is blaring a headline that says, "Media often seem as enemy of minorities." So, as we talk about the media and the racial issues, let me just ask you, Dick, it's your newspaper today that's blaring that headline. What do you think from behind the scenes?
You mean as far as race is concerned?
Is race playing a part here in the O.J. Simpson case?
Well,
in your opinion?
I think it's inevitable that race is going to play some role because you do have a defendant and victims that are of different color. I don't think it has the emotional resonance of a King case. I mean, because the King case was just a graphic depiction, I think, of what a lot of people in the streets see happening between white police officers and black suspects. This doesn't have that level of emotion. But I just want to also mention on the question of fair trial and media. I think that the level of media coverage is going to contribute to a fair trial in the sense that we have been so obsessed, it is such a feeding frenzy, that we've confused the public. I mean, we've just overloaded them with information.
Yeah.
And we've also given them enough errors. There have been enough errors in this coverage the people suddenly go, what do we believe?
What do we
don't know
believe?
anything.
Exactly. Caller, hello. Hello, caller. Hello.
Hello.
Come on, join the conversation. What's your name?
My name's Alan. I'm from Orlando, Florida. And Rolonda, I think the media is crucifying O.J. Simpson. I am white. I have been in jail for first-degree murder, which I did not do. The deck was stacked against me. I've also been in jail with a black man by the name of James Richardson, who did 22 years in prison, 12 of them on death row, for a murder supposedly he did on his kids, which, come to find out, the law down in Arcadia, Florida, falsified evidence, hid evidence, and had that man convicted.
So in terms of O.J., what do you think that the media...
He cannot get a fair trial. There's no way, nobody in this country, Rolonda, can say that I have not heard about O.J. Simpson. I do not know O.J. Simpson.
Well, let me tell you something. You bring up a good point. I went to Turkey this summer, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm in a Turkish bath. In Turkey, and looking up at the television screen, watching the O.J. Simpson trial.
Absolutely.
It's bizarre. We're going to continue. I know we've got questions. We've got to take a break. The O.J. Simpson story is being covered worldwide, as I just mentioned, by thousands of reporters and photojournalists. But when is enough enough? When do you want to say, forget this for a day at least? We'll be back and have more of us speaking out today on O.J.
Al giallo dell'estate americana, la processa O.J. Simpson.
A preliminary hearing of the evidence against Simpson has...
We're live back here in Los Angeles. Welcome back, everybody. We have a phone call. Hello, caller.
Hi.
Hi, what's your name?
Jolene.
Where are you from, Jolene?
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. What you have to say?
Well, I'm getting very angry at everything that everybody's saying. I think it has nothing to do with race. I'm from New England. Maybe we see things different here, but I don't see it as a racial issue. He's a human being, and if he is guilty, it was a crime of passion. It's got nothing to do with what his color is, where he's from. It just upsets me so much to think that everybody's going to make this to a racial issue now.
Okay.
When did
Thank
they
you.
I'd like to echo that by saying that race is basically, in this case, a political construct, and that it is used to manipulate people and draw them away from the real issues. That the media has basically been irresponsible and, again, politically motivated, and wouldn't know the real issues if they were looking at their navel. I'd just like to say what the real issues are, from my perspective, as just a human being. Namely, the sanctity of the male-female bond and the demise of the family, the way we raise our males to be basically aggressive and macho, so much so that a lot of them can't communicate with women in words at all, the way we idolize our sports heroes because they're major, mega money makers.
So what you're saying is there's more to this than just this race issue that people are bringing up. Elka, you have been closer than anybody we've talked to so far in this case. You sit in the courtroom. You've been there since day one. You have what to say on this?
Well, I'm just in terms of the coverage, would we have the same amount of coverage if this had happened to O.J. Simpson's first wife, who happens to be black? And I don't believe there would have been all this media hype, and race is a subtle issue in this case.
And you're saying that from the front line?
Yes.
I want to make a point. I agree completely with the last caller. However, and with one of the panel members, that the media has been over glorifying this whole case. They have indeed succeeded in confusing the public. And I have a qualm with something that the last caller said. This is not a crime of passion. This is not an issue of racism. This is an issue of domestic violence. It is an issue of men continually victimizing women.
But you know something, this is what a lot of people are saying. You bring up these issues and you're going to find somebody in the crowd who's going, and you are touched by this. You've got tears in her eyes.
It makes me angry. LA is a very dangerous city. I got attacked last year at my front door. This is an issue of violence against women. Now, whether or not
to her it is an issue.
Whether or not
O.J.
gets a fair trial, there is documented police evidence that he had a history of beating this woman. She tried to get a court order to keep him away from her.
And you're afraid, what I hear you saying, is that you're afraid that all this talk of racism and media is getting away from the point that is precious to you.
It's true. That is absolutely true.
Okay, and I see you're agreeing.
Yes,
Come on and stand up, and thank you very much.
They forget that this is a crime against women, that no matter who did it, the Anna man also was brutally murdered because he could not let go.
Okay. I think it is valid, whether you agree with this or not, it is valid to make the point that these are other issues that are coming out of this case, and let me just, while we're standing here, there's 2 children who don't have their mother. Whatever happened. That's what's bothering me. Hold on.
Okay, yeah. 2 things, Rolonda. One, I think it's less of an issue of race and more an issue of income. If you don't have a lot of money, you're not going to get a fair trial. Number 2, somebody has to be feeding the money. Somebody has to be feeding the media. Okay, the cops, they were getting the information out. Who else could?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Everybody has been jumping into this. First, it was the district attorney's office were leaking things to the press. Then, of course, Shapiro and the defense attorneys started leaking things, and they've done a very effective job this week. I mean, we may have confused you, but they're the people who helped us confuse you with things like the story that they leaked to the New Yorker magazine, no less, who now have suddenly made this leap that this cop stole a glove and brought it over to O.J.'s house. So yes, race is an issue. One speaker just said something about us being politically motivated. I mean, if anything, the media is motivated by making money. I mean, let's be honest. It's not political motivation at all.
Especially with the competition. And Elka, I don't want to lose the point that you were making. I got to take a quick break now, but you say that racism is, you're in the front line, you're in the courtroom. I want to continue with you and you and you and everybody in America when we come back.
You criticize me. Well, you guys are just slime bag media. You just want the dirt, and we can't get the facts. And unfortunately, I think that's the biggest fallout of this is the trust of the media is going right down the tube.
We're back live from Los Angeles. As we talked about the media and racism as it pertains to the O.J. Simpson case, I really appreciate, I know you got a little heat for what you said, but I appreciate your saying that the issue is about domestic violence. We believe that is at least what people are talking about, and something worth talking about, as we always say in Rolonda. Let me remind you, we're live in Los Angeles all week, and on Friday, we are going to do a whole show on domestic violence from Los Angeles. And for those of you concerned, please tune in because, as we always say, it is something definitely worth talking about. Now, we have a caller in. Hello, caller.
Yes.
Hi, where are you from and who are you?
My name is Michelle. I'm from New York City.
Okay, Michelle, what's on your mind?
I think the media has been extremely racist in this issue. I take the word of the journalist that's on the panel who said that had it been a black wife involved, that all this wouldn't be. I think we can believe what she says. She has on hands in this issue. The gentleman that's on the panel in the dark suit, the black gentleman that was in the first panel.
Larry, that must be you.
Must be.
I resented his statement in his opening statement. He made a statement that said that we have real issues, real problems in this country. And he spoke about a little boy, which I feel, my heart goes out for. Mm-hmm. But then he turned around and he said that O.J. is not a real problem. He's got $10 million. He can get the best lawyers in town. But that doesn't take away the fact that O.J. is human and he's a being like the little boy. Mm-hmm. So certainly I feel that we ought to address him as being equally important as someone else.
Well, one thing for sure, and I appreciate that comment, one thing for sure, he is innocent until so proven guilty. At least that is the American standard that we go by with our justice system, and that we cannot forget.
Rolonda, since you mentioned me, may I say something about that?
Sure, but make it quick because I want to get to Elka on this.
The idea of interjecting race where it doesn't belong, to me, cheapens the charge. And it makes it have less of a sting when there are real instances of racism. The NAACP just had a convention in Chicago, and several kids from the NAACP convention went to Burger King, and they couldn't get in. The hierarchy of the NAACP announced a boycott. The next day, they called off the boycott. It must have been the shortest boycott in history, because they found out that probably the kids arrived at Burger King after Burger King had closed. Now see, this is the kind of stuff that happens constantly when you use the charge carelessly.
Okay.
Race has nothing to do with it. This man has $10 million. He can fend for himself. I'm more concerned about the 9-year-old boy in the streets in New Orleans than I am about a $10 million superstar athlete getting a fair trial.
So what I hear you saying, okay. Elka, we're coming right back to you. We'll be back in a second. Today, if you hear this, is just, don't you like just talking about it? I mean, I always say that I think talk shows are like that old picket fence we used to hang over and tell our neighbors and argue with our neighbors about issues that affect our country and our families and ourselves. I mean, we're challenging each other, and it's always good for a good argument. We're back with you, live from Los Angeles, continuing asking the question, can O.J. get a fair trial? Elka, with United Press International, you are right there in the courtroom, been there since day one. What is the mood in there? What is it like inside that courtroom?
Well, I think O.J. has changed considerably from the preliminary hearing to now. I mean, in the beginning, when he came in for the arraignment, he was very somber. He looked like he was on drugs, drugged up, and now he comes in and he's much more confident. He's smiling. He's shaking hands with his new defense attorneys. And you see a change. And when you have someone that says absolutely 100% not guilty, you know, that's going to have an impact. And you see a change in the man.
You know, one of the things I remember covering so many cases, I know you jumped out of your chair. You must have something to say here, for goodness sakes.
I'm really, really angered and disgusted with the TV media, because when I hear especially something like that, I don't care. I don't want to look at his face for 24 hours a day on TV.
Well, when should we stop?
When the LA riots were on, I think the TV helped invigorate a situation. And I think Bill Cosby was the man of the hour when he put his TV show back on the air to break up the 24-hour monopoly that the TV media had on increasing the riot violence.
When is too much too much?
We already know that too much is too much. I think the general consensus here, whether you agree or disagree, it's been overkill. But, you know, Larry said something I think was interesting about how race can come into it, although he said it didn't. I say it does, but let me go back to something he said. The NAACP, at that same convention in Chicago, you had over 100 black youth that won awards, that won merit achievement certificates in all categories of talent. You know how much media was there? Zero. Zero media was there. And I always say this, that if those same black youths, talented, educated, aware, if they were out there carjacking, gangbanging, dope dealing, the media would have been all over there. So that's the problem when you come to an O.J.
Let me ask our journalists here. Do you guys ever feel in your career, especially at this time, that you're being compromised in any way? That because we do this because people want to see it.
That's absolutely right. And one of the executives at ABC News the other night said that when they went off to the and turned back from the trial coverage to the soap operas, they lost their entire audience. The entire audience tuned out and went to the other channels to watch O.J.
Right.
What you are telling us, no matter what you're saying here, is in the extreme, you want more O.J. coverage. Circulation is up, ratings are up, you know.
And we'll be right back. We'll be right back. I'll take a quick break. Tomorrow, our show, as we continue our week-long coverage here in Los Angeles at KCAL, we're going to talk about all the money that's being made off this case. Have you seen folks out there hawking T-shirts and bumper stickers and all kinds of things? We're going to ask the question, is this the right thing to do? I mean, we're going to talk about all kinds of things. The main thing is that we've got to stick by that old thing that everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Everybody's entitled to a fair trial. Come join us tomorrow as we continue our conversation. See ya.